Hey everyone, happy Friday. We're gonna get officially started in just a couple minutes here, but I just thought it'd be um, nice to get a little of the pre-show chatter out there for everyone. I know that we got the Dash folks are very happy to hear from you guys. Also, I do have to remark on the the color coordination of I see like the blue in the shirt matches the little blue on that purple shirt. See the little logo there, and matches the eye color, and then the Dash blue mug. It's some interesting coordinations.
I should have brought my Dash Toberfest shirt. I still have it, and it's actually still in good shape. So I
Yeah,
don't know
I have it
anything of
too. I haven't worn it in a while, but I should bring it out. Um, I wanted to put my big Dash like framed picture thing on the wall, but I didn't have time, so now I'll just have to have my other random collection of stuff instead. But I do have a shirt on, so that's good. Um,
And you have a good taste in whiskey, I can see.
yes, that was a gift from Justin Bonds, actually.
Okay.
So, and
Maybe he has a good taste in whiskey.
Lagavulin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes, it was the Ron Swanson edition or whatever because of the Parks and Rec character. But then, of course, everyone loves the Doge pillow, and then they have the Dash whiskey glass set right next to it, which is what some random guy from Belarus was advertising it, and so I just sent some guy on Instagram or whatever um, some Dash, and then like 2 months later, a suspicious looking package came from Belarus, and oh, there we go. And then of course the the glass there is an ETH Dam branded glass that I got after last year or this year, I should
Yes.
say. And then Hijacking Bitcoin, Roger Vere's book, the Tor plushie, I got that one from Naomi Brockwell.
Of course.
Yeah, and then there's a SIM card from Dubai that they just give you when you stamp your passport. They give you a SIM card. I'm not putting that in my phone,
What could possibly go
but
wrong?
I was putting it there. And then we have a little bottle of Vegemite also from Naomi Brockwell because she wants to spread her culture around the world. And yeah,
Sure.
I'm slowly, and if you can see right below that, there's a tag, there's a badge from Consensus for, it's like the highest level VIP. It's like a $5,000 ticket that some random person was like, hey, it's the last day. Someone gave this to me to get you into parties. Here you go. I'm like, okay. And I didn't get into a single party with it, but it's there anyway. So, yeah.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Connect.
add it. I hope we get more Dash trinkets and things. The Dash community is much less active about this kind of stuff, but hopefully we get to change that and start to do more cool things. It's probably a good time to get started officially. Just make sure we're not missing anything, and then all right, let me roll the intro and we'll get right into it. So, hey everyone, happy Friday officially now. This is the Dash Podcast, episode 216. I'm doing 216 of these. It's kind of funny. I just did my news show, which I've been doing much less time, and that was episode 169. So it's catching up. There will be a flipping eventually because, at best, I do this show every month. Less often these days, but typically every month, whereas the other one should be every week. But yeah, everyone, thanks very much for tuning in. I have Andreas and Peter of CrowdNode, and yeah, hi guys. Good to have you here. Sorry for having you so late, but it's the schedule.
It's a long day, but that's okay, Joel. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, so before we jump into I guess the nuts and bolts of this. This is of course my own channel. I don't charge the treasury anything for this, but I do apparently charge Coin ATM Radar because they actually pay me for this, which is very very nice of them. So I got to show them real quick. So this podcast is of course sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place. And just like an exchange, and unlike an exchange, I should say, which could freeze your account, you truly own all the crypto you buy. Self-custody for the win, of course. With Coin ATM Radar, you can find crypto ATMs and other services where you can buy or sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On their website, search by coin, address, if the ATM supports selling, which is great for someone like me who doesn't have fiat, as well as buying. And you can also search by geo area, like country, state, city. You can also check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. Find out more, go to coinatmradar.com or coinatmradar.com or .com. There we go. It wasn't so bad. Yes. So at some point, I'm also in the process of trying to get the official Dash X account enough views so it can be eligible for monetization. So then maybe Elon will pay us like a little bit to do our posts, which would be nice because there are ads that show up under posts, but we might as well get paid for them. And
Yes.
Currently I do get paid on my own account on X, but it's like $40 a month or something like that. It's nothing too crazy, nothing too good, but that every little bit counts as far as like saving for the treasury. And so yeah, that's kind of that whole thing. So how are you guys doing? How's it been?
Good. In short, wonderful summer. Right now we have a heat wave, so it's almost Indian summer, no pun intended. But that basically means more than 20 degrees Celsius during the night. Some places in the country. So yeah, today it's 28. It basically feels like in the middle of summer, but everyone's back to work. So that's obviously a bit annoying that we're not on vacation.
But it's for a Danish person, it's very exciting to be able to sit outside and have dinner in September.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yay.
Yeah.
But busy as always. You?
Very much the same. I've been traveling all over this year, and I just was in Colorado not too long ago. But immediately before that, I was in Las Vegas for a crypto conference, and Las Vegas in August is not a really pleasant place to be. It gets around like 45 centigrade or whatever, 45 Celsius. So opening the door, it's like you open the door to an oven. And so
Sauna.
yeah, although not humid. So there is that, because if you stay out of if there's cloud cover, it's so much more bearable. Whereas when I was in Austin and then also Nashville, which are both in the south of the U.S., there's humidity there. So when you walk outside anytime, just sweat right away. Whereas at least with Vegas, you have to be under the sun for a few minutes before the sweat starts to come. So it could be worse, is my point.
Well, yeah, it's not bad at all with 28 degrees. It's actually quite nice.
Yeah, of course. I do like more temperate climates personally, but we don't always get what we want. But anyway, as far as like, I definitely wanted to have, now that like Evo is out, now that Evo is now, I wanted to start up a lot more promo and stuff on like my channels as well as just the official things, get the word out. And I know that we talked a lot since April, which is when we finally, ran into each other in person again, and talked a lot about some of the particulars of the evolving crypto landscape in Europe and everything. And so that's kind of why I wanted to have you guys on to chat, to explain a little bit more about this kind of stuff. But first, the Evo stuff, right? As the world knows, Evo now. September 2nd is when the chain started to launch and crank out new blocks. And as far as I'm able to tell, everything is working suspiciously well. Like, considering all the disasters and all the fear and everything seems to be working quite well. But you guys would know better than most people because you run Evo nodes and infrastructure. So any initial thoughts or perspectives from that?
So you may know that the actual hosting of it is outsourced, right? But the effects of it and the attention that it needs, I'm trying to stay on top of that, obviously. And I do have a small fact slide of things, but obviously the rollout when we had like the Genesis block that was very fortunately mined by or proposed by a CrowdNode, Evo node, and then subsequently you could say the chain halted because the quorum failed to have sufficient nodes to be able to propose new blocks. The details have been explained, right? And the fun part there was that for a couple of days it seemed like a large part of credit pool funds building up that would potentially only go to CrowdNode members minus our 15%, right? But the fortunate other aspect obviously was that Sam managed to get a hold of I think it was 4 Evo nodes, node operators, and helped to sign manually, so the quorum could assume its duties and then start producing blocks. So I think surprisingly good. Yes, Joel. At least now, right? We are producing blocks steadily. I think you're absolutely right. It could have been much worse. And obviously there will be hiccups when rolling out something like this. And besides the minor bugs, I think platform is in a pretty good shape. And we just very recently finished the first epoch. And from a numbers perspective, that meant that the Evo nodes that CrowdNode has up and running produced, I'll get the number, 343.6 dash to our members. So we can't withdraw them yet, and I still don't know what the withdrawal will look like. Last stand-up or presentation from the team, I tried asking gently in the chat what it would look like, and Sam seems to know exactly what he thinks it's going to look like, but it's I'm not really seeing it yet. So I'm really looking forward to when we will be able to withdraw that pot of Dash, that credit pool proportion that's for us and our members, because it's been noticed by several that at platform launch the rewards dropped significantly, or at least the distribution of them. Not only the payment cycles went from around 1.5 dash to 0.9 dash per reward, but also the frequency, because Evo nodes went to only getting one payment per payment cycle, right? So there's been an impact, and obviously I'm very excited to get some more info when possibly available by the team to as to how we're going to withdraw, and then put the final touch on the distribution mechanism for that. But so far so good. I absolutely agree. It's really exciting to finally see platform, out publicly live after 8 years.
We have to find a new meme instead of when Evo.
When withdrawal.
Listen,
When
there's
withdrawal.
there's a lot of new memes now.
Yes.
The big one that there's already an emoji for in the Discord is when VM, because
Yes.
one of the, I guess, a major feature that's going to be added relatively soon, for how major it is, from my understanding, is smart contract capabilities.
Yes.
And I guess apparently that's something that a lot of things need in crypto. A lot of things need these days for builders. You want programmability. Even basic things like stable coins are now starting to need that kind of thing. And so, like, for example, I was just talking earlier today about PayPal's stablecoin that has a confidential transfers feature, which basically hides the amounts of transactions, even though you could still see if I sent you some PayPal USD, you just can't see how much I sent you. And that's not inherently a feature of the Solana protocol, but I'm sure if you run it through a smart contract, you can add things like that. So
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool things that could do, and yeah, but it
But
is.
before we get to that, I'm really, getting the documentation up to speed. Not from our side, but the teams within DCG. I think that's the natural next step. I've tried the Platform Explorer. Had some issues with that. Semic was
Looks pretty though.
It looks pretty. Semic was really, or however you pronounce it, swift to reply on my issues. And then I tried the Platform TUI. I had
The
some
hot
issues
TUI.
getting, yeah, had issues getting that up and running. But Paul and the PES, I don't know how to pronounce it. Depends on where he's from. Was also very vigilant to help me and answer. So, but the guides didn't work right. Just minor details that were missing. So just ironing out. And getting those curves straight, so it's easy to onboard new people to the community and to the wonderful features that platform will bring to the crypto space, and obviously to ourselves. So yeah, but the future is green, right?
Yeah, it's
The color of hope.
fantastic. Oh, it has been pretty good to see because what I think a lot of people sort of woke up in the community of the last few years to realize is that we had a massive, I would say, I don't know if massive is the right word, but a significant advantage above all the rest of the crypto space in terms of like alignment as to what needs to be fixed next in crypto after we finish basic payments, instant transactions, privacy, some other things. It's like, what do we need to work on next? And it kind of partially there's a lot of like mismanagement, of course, but also some of it is just it's a hard problem. All that head start was sort of like, we sort of woke up 2021, 2022 and realized, wow, we have a lot further to go than we thought. We thought we're going to have Evo launch 2018, 2019. We thought by 2021 or so, okay, it's late, but it's basically ready. Whenever it hit DevNet the first time, and then testnet, and then like eventually, after Sam started to take over, and it started to come out this like ugly picture of like, wow, we have a lot to do, and then even in the early part of the year when we're like, oh, we're almost ready to release. It's like there's so much left. And then finally when the decision proposal came and was like, let's just release something that works. And hopefully, and Sam and XK and some others kept on saying, it's at least a 50-50 chance that the chain won't start and that it will go down a few times, or, just like we're really just barely releasing. And then I feel like there's this giant scramble of like, oh, we got to get it ready in time. Oh no one's sleeping. And then I did have some calls with Sam where almost none of it was like practical. Almost everything was just like complaining, like just like, oh, these people, he's not here. What's going on? Oh no. Oh, and just like the stress of it. And then finally it released. There was a scramble to get it started because of various things, and then it started, and it's been very relatively calm. Like it actually just works, kind of. There's not like, well, it worked, and then we have to fix this. Like, no, it works. Great. Now we can relax.
Woohoo! No, we can't.
I was gonna say, don't jinx it. It's still early days.
Yes, of course. But yeah, from your perspective, everything's worked relatively well, right?
Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah. Now, on the whole, running Evo nodes as opposed to regular master nodes, has it been relatively easy? Is it more profitable considering the specs of running the actual infrastructure node versus what they've been getting paid? What do you think?
Yeah, so there is an increased profitability by running Evo nodes. I think that's obvious to everyone. And the cost of an Evo node, although the collateral is 4x, is not 4x a normal node. It's a bit less than that, obviously. So on on that note, yes, more profitable, of course. It does come with a bit of different aspects that could have had a small impact. When rolling up an Evo node, we need 4,000 Dash in collateral. That means we need to take down a couple of nodes that might or might not be queued for payment sooner than later, right? So losing a couple of days in a payment queue for a normal node versus spinning up a new Evo node. In particularly in the early days of when you could start an Evo node, but no foreseeable, deterministic future announced by Sam as to when platform would launch, and then the rewards would increase. So we try to balance it and sort to have a sort of, what do we want? Maybe say half of normal nodes and Evo nodes from the perspective of the custodial side of things. For now, trustless nodes are only normal nodes. But let's touch on that later. So besides that, I think it's with the first epoch done and the Dash sitting there in the credit pool, that's CrowdNode members to claim. We will see a increase in rewards being distributed to our members. So I think that's a good thing. And I think it's gonna not reach a complete equilibrium in terms of a return on investment or APY, but I think that over the next couple of months we'll see more Evo nodes, and the sort of benefit of running them will the two percentages of RI will get closer, but I think there's always going to be a difference, and we'll just try to manage what's optimal from sort of holistic perspective, related to our when we need to process withdrawals. If it's a large withdrawal, should we take down an Evo node? I hope never, but at least maybe we can take down a normal node and then process a withdrawal. So we sort of need to balance it still, and for obvious reasons as well, balance it up to this point, because we couldn't have all our platform Dash locked in Evo nodes, because then there would be a long period where our members wouldn't get paid anything. So yeah, we've tried to balance it. I think we struck a somewhat okay balance, at least.
But we have been debating internally what the mix should be between putting things in Evo nodes and still having some regular nodes to give the flexibility when we need to take down something, and also to use the standard nodes or the old master nodes as sort of a springboard for hopefully accumulating a Dash until we're ready to launch another Evo node. And I don't know what the numbers are now. What do we have? 20 regular nodes or something like that?
We have 24 regular, and then 23 Evo nodes, and then there's 18 in trustless. 18
so in theory, you could kill all of them and launch another 6 Evo nodes, right? But that would be impractical for the reasons that Andreas just mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of interesting how the market and situations change necessarily, like different aspects or requirements or these things. So I mean, obviously, if you're pursuing pure profit, there might be a different mixture. On the other hand, as you mentioned, flexibility is another one, but also as a significant chunk of Evo nodes, I feel like more than anyone else, CrowdNode has been more willing to run Evo nodes than the rest of Dash holders. It seems like a lot of them are just running their old master node, and then now that they can get paid more with Evo nodes, they don't even pay attention. Or some of them don't have enough for an Evo node, but even though
I think that's also an obvious explanation.
I think there could also be a little bit of a let's wait and see. I suspect that if Evo runs, very stable and everything is fine the next month or two, that probably some of the people who have 5, 6, 7, 10, 20,000 Dash maybe packed away in the classic masternodes will convert some of that. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we'll see sort of a jump, and maybe within the next 2 months. Maybe we're already seeing it actually. There's something happening on the graph I saw earlier today actually. The MNO watch count of Evo nodes. That looked promising.
Yeah, for sure. And also, just like, I think a lot of it being like held back by withdrawals is a big thing. Where if there's no withdrawals, for people who need liquid capital, that's a problem. Because right now there's nothing that supports the Evo chain other than integrated Dash things. So like if you want to like sell your credits on Coinbase or whatever, it's not going to work out, right? You can't do that. You have to swap the Dash first. And of course that means someone could already start like a secondary market for that kind of thing today. Although it'd be a little useless because if withdrawals do happen very soon, you wasted all that time building a market for nothing. But, for example, you could have that. So I personally predict maybe that over the next few years, the percentage of Dash in Evo nodes versus master nodes is going to go significantly higher. Just because the revenue that comes to the network for the core chain is always going to be negligible until you have mass volumes, until you have just tons of people. And the core chain does one thing, which is send Dash, whereas the Evo chain does all kinds of things, writes documents, creates data contracts, can transfer funds as well, we'll be transferring tokens like stable coins, do all kinds of, and maybe smart contract operations within a year, all that stuff. And so there's just going to be so much more activity, hopefully, again, if we're successful, on that chain, producing fees and things like that, and then people paying for data storage, and then just all this kind of stuff. And so hopefully it'll turn into that sort of a system, pretty quickly. You might end up having very few over the long term, very few non-Evo nodes over a long period of time, because every single Evo node also is a regular master node for core, so they're already getting some of the fees and stuff. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the economics of that play out. One thing that I thought was very interesting is how many people I just saw showing up into various social platforms and stuff. Even people who've been in Dash for a long time, also people who I had no idea they existed, saying, "Hey, my rewards went down. What happened?" And they're like, "Listen, someone hasn't been paying attention."
Where have you been?
There was this thing called a hard fork.
Yes. It is kind of like the realities of things that are structurally, Dash is quite a decentralized project. In practice, most people, it still is, but most people will just not pay attention and run the code that comes out in the core repositories. And I noticed this earlier in the year when some mining people came and approached me and were like, "Hey, all of our miners are very upset that they lost rewards after the last year." I'm like, "Yeah, there was a whole governance proposal to reallocate and all this stuff." And there's like, and it only after that proposal, there was a new version of core that included these changes that these same miners ran the code, and like they don't see what they're running. They just say, "It must be good stuff." And they're like, "Hey, wait, we don't get as much money." Like, yeah, there's a lot of that stuff. And then when the initial, during the Evo activation period, there was a period of stress where some people in some other segments of the Dash community were like freaking out and saying, "What happened with all this? I'm not getting paid as much. I'm just going to stop running masternodes altogether and get out of Dash." You're like, no, wait. Just upgrade, please. And then like, "Oh, can you please help us start the chain?" "I don't know. This is a scam." Like, all that stuff, and now things are a little more quiet. Yeah, so it would be a good time to get into the particulars of where CrowdNode goes from here, because you guys
Yes.
have been in the community for a very long time. Basically, what I would call is like a one of the main pillars of the Dash community, in fact. And from our discussions earlier in the year, talking about all kinds of stuff, it seems like, unfortunately, I would say unfortunately, but I guess there is a silver lining to regulatory clarity. But there's a lot of changes that affect Europeans, and so I think a lot of people who are not in crypto business don't really know this, especially people who are not in Europe. But even a
Yes.
lot of European users on the user level probably just don't even understand what's going on. So would you mind giving a quick outline of what are the changes that are affecting CrowdNode this year?
Yes. So maybe it's a good time to just share a slide. I know it's what I would call a German slide. Again, no pun intended. Has lots of text on it. That's basically what that means in Danish. But I did prepare a small slideshow, and I would just jump right to that. I'll just go by this one. So that's the present development for the past 2 years ish. You could argue we're still growing and scaling.
And that's
Numbers.
that's amount of Dash that's in
That's amount
CrowdNode,
of
right?
Dash, yeah. So we're getting close to 140K. So we have a bit more than 2,000 members with a positive balance, more than 600 with a balance of more than 10, and 27,000 Dash plus in API only members. So, but this is the price of Dash. So I just wanted to show the ridiculous, controversial, or what do you call it?
Contrast.
Contrast, right? So that's just the fun
I
thing.
hope that correlation doesn't imply causation,
No.
because then it's all our fault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the stats. We just touched them, right? But yeah, first part. Let me just go past this one, and then on to what's really on the agenda. MiCA. And MiCA is short for Market in Crypto Assets, and it's a regulation that will take effect end of year 24 for EU. It's a bit tricky because even though it's something that's only within EU, a thing that's known, it will definitely affect everyone who wants to provide a service to any EU citizen. And also anyone operating a service within EU for customers anywhere in the world. Sorry? I'll do that. Excellent. So the sort of territorial element to MiCA is really important to understand. Any service provider providing services to someone within EU must have a license going from end of year. And this basically goes for anyone. In terms of being an issuer, I put that in italic just to highlight we're not an issuer, but Dash obviously is issuing new Dash. So the rules are sort of clear on that aspect, but at least we're a service provider. From that perspective, we need to have it. And what does it mean and what areas? Yeah, so the goal is to set transparency and also sort of disclose requirements, reduce risks, all sorts of them. And a lot of it is basically to secure members, in our case, customers, users of a service, and provide some guardrails for what is required if you operate a service to EU citizens or from within EU itself. So personally, although it's a long read, it's not a bad thing because we've actually lacked this sort of regulatory framework for years, meaning people have been operating within what local FSAs or government authorities had opinions about, but now it's regulated on a much higher level, at least end of year. So it's going to set some guidelines, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, and we can get into the details.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good thing as to maturing when you are a noob, I don't understand anything about crypto user type of guy, that you can feel more safe dealing with the crypto space. So less Sam Bankman-Fried episodes and all that stuff, right? On if you were to take an extreme point of view, and more control and governance and compliance, and not seeing so many cases of that type, at least going forward, protecting.
But I mean, if you come from sort of a grassroots crypto mindset, and it just reeks of bureaucracy, and the free market is king, and we shouldn't have any of that. That's you're obviously sort of the gut reaction for a lot of people. And then there's the other thing, and that is that there is no real, maybe there is in practice, but at least in theory, there is no sort of how shall I say, if you're under this bar, you don't have to worry about this kind of you're too small to fall under this regulation. And that basically can stifle a lot of things, because it means that unless you are big enough that you can sort of pay your way out of becoming compliant, you're not part of the game. You have to either not do what you plan to do, or do it outside of the European Union. So just like with many other regulatory hurdles, this will stifle certain activities. No question about it. You can say once you're the size of, Kraken or something, then this is probably almost trivial, right? Because you can sort of pay for enough lawyers to make sure that everything you do follows all of this to a T. But I think it's not so much, we can have a philosophical discussion whether this is good or bad and unbalanced and what's the pros and cons. But the fact is that this is hitting by December this year. And it's not an optional thing, at least if you operate out of the EU.
Yeah, so this affects any company that services the EU customers, as well as just being located in the EU, correct?
Yeah,
exactly.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's the extraterritorial application of law that Mika embraces here, to its some would call it government overreach perspective, right? But
especially a lot of crypto people.
Yes.
For sure.
It's not an option not to do this as a company. Being a libertarian and whatever, as a private person, you'll be able to duck and cover, possibly, at least if you're a non-European citizen. But as a company, you can't duck and cover your way out of this. And the first pre-proposal lineup I did on Discord was also just highlighting some positive aspects and some negative aspects, which would not only be applied for CrowdNode, because obviously this is applied for CrowdNode, but I think at least one pointed out that the European market is the second largest market in the world. So should we just not try to get a license, at least when we're this deeply integrated into the Dash community? I don't feel that's an option. But at least as a company, it's definitely not an option. So you could argue the bias there is not even present. So we need to do something. And if we were to sort of discuss what that something looks like, then just to enlighten you guys on why I call it a German slide, there's some sub bullets here. We need a license. It's to basically ensure that we have financial and operational standards that suffice. It needs to be documented. I have another slide on that. So overall, it's the ambition to provide customer protection. And as far as that goes, there's obvious reasons for high transparency, which very fortunately is something we've always had. So you could argue if all companies were just, following the same level of transparency as we were, Mika might not have been a thing in the first place. Now, I know that's probably not true. But anyways, the point is, we're not doing bad right now in terms of having that. But Mika requires us to produce reports, to prove it, to get it audited by externals. And also, the work in doing that correlates with other European laws as well, and other things we need to do, especially around the risk of being a customer. We need possibly also to show NIS2 compliance, maybe even an ISO 27000 series compliance as well. But let's just start with Mika, all right? Because that's a good first step. The joker, and that's also debated in the Discord channel, is what does it mean to follow the anti-money laundering laws and the CUC requirements? My working hypothesis, and here I am obviously biased, is that at least for the non-custodial, I don't see any reason why we should, do a need to CUC our customers or members. As for the custodial part, if we can prove that there is no risk, then I don't see why that would be needed either. And I know, Joel, you and we talked about, I think, the one address principle in especially around mixing situations, and not only for CrowdNode, right, but also for other providers, exchanges, etc. So if you can always have this, front door address, and funds are sent from that, and funds are going back to that, then there is a closed loop and no, as far as I can tell, anti-money laundering risk on it. But that needs to be tested, right? And we need to write the documentation and the reports and processes and all that.
The risk can also be reworded. We can say that the fact that we know that since we have this same address for everything going in and out of custody, let's say, including whatever in this framework they would call it staking rewards, you might have accrued, that there is no, you can't use that service to launder money in any way. The fact that we know that is true and that makes sense also from a technical point of view doesn't necessarily mean that it's that we can get sort of the relevant people to agree to that and say, yeah, we get it, you're right. Of course, that's what we want, and that's what we're going for. But it's an argument that needs to be made, and needs to be made, let's be honest, with people that are less technical than one would like.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it's going to work. But it is, that's why Andreas calls it a risk, right? Because we cannot know a priori that they won't say, no. It doesn't matter what you say. You have to go through know your customer no matter what. No ands, ifs, and buts about it. And that would be extremely annoying. And it wouldn't necessarily be the end of the world for the whole thing. But it would be extremely annoying and scare away some of our members and just be a general pain in the ass, not to mention a vast expense, because this is something that for other regulatory reasons is something that is annoying to deal with, and you probably, I mean, hopefully that we don't have to go there, is what I'm saying. And I think we have a very compelling argument, to be honest, but that doesn't mean that we will get our way. It just means we hope that we get our way.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if everything is serious, right, as far as like, if it is a anti-money laundering type law and requirement, and they're kind of serious in good faith about this, about like, oh yeah, we understand, there's no real risk, then that's fine. But if they have their own ideas or guidelines of what they think constitutes no money laundering, and they're like, well, that means you need to have everyone identified. He said, but there's no risk. Like, we don't care. Everyone needs to be identified. I guess that's kind of the risk, but
That is the risk, but it's honestly impossible to know.
yeah.
And I don't see this Mika thing as sort of a bad faith. I mean, it the way it's worded, and also I would say the sort of the buzz around it, at least from what we know from the Danish FSA communication, I don't get the vibe that this is really sort of a not so covert attempt to just knock down anything related to crypto and to say, let's just kill it. If that's what they're trying to do, then they're being very subtle about it, I would say. I think this is an honest attempt to save the poor consumer from exit scams and God knows what with regulation. And whether that works or not is another matter. I mean, I don't actually necessarily think that this will eliminate all kinds of crypto scams, if I'm honest. But I think this is the attempt, and the money laundering aspect of it. For some services that could be a really actually relevant thing for those that are worried about money laundering. But I think it's also something that you slap on everything that has to do with moving money around, including crypto these days.
It's also slapped on moving cash.
Yeah, it's slapped on everything. I mean,
basically, you're not allowed to carry more than 2,000 euros in cash anymore, right? So it covers a lot of things.
I didn't even know that. No, just, nothing surprises me anymore. I mean, it's just a one-way relentless march until until you can only have your money in a bank account. That's the end goal.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's some agendas for sure that are moving that way. But in the meantime, yeah, there's this. So basically, it seems like you need to have a license is the big thing, and you need audits and et cetera, et cetera. And
I think the conclusion is we don't have a choice.
Yes,
really. That's how I see it.
So basically, it seems like if CrowdNode wants to continue to operate, there needs to be a license. And correct. If not, if that's not on the table, then it's just like, all right, shut down the company, kind of. Give everyone back their Dash, no more nodes, it's done. So
yes, so and that's I personally don't want to take the risk of getting, if it's in the lighter end of punishment, a fine for running CrowdNode. In the other end of the aspect of what they can do, that's basically jail time, right? Yeah. But the risk is not necessarily the only one. The personal being owners and running a company. It's also that they would sort of seize assets and freeze all funds, and members can't get their withdrawals. And that would be sort of an even more horrific.
No problem. It's just a Mt. Gox situation. You might see some of your money 10 years later. Like, what the hell?
So I wouldn't want to, risk that for anyone, right? But that's also motivation for going trustless, and we'll touch that later, I hope. But yeah, I find it very fortunate that CrowdNode is not big enough to be processed down in headquarters. We are processed by the Danish FSA due to the size we are, and the contact because we reached out, they're friendly. They actually know their tech.
Yeah, it's much better than you might fear.
Yeah, and so far they've been really helpful in pointing us in directions to what we need to do, and also assuring us that right now we're okay, but we need to have something in place end of year. So and something in place end of year. I always argue that it's good to be in process, but it's obviously best to have the license. But if we can prove that we're in process, then we're also fine. I would pretty much assume. But I'm really I think we're fortunate that we're not big enough to be treated from EU headquarters, but we're staying within the Danish FSA's regulatory standpoints and interpretations of it. As for Mika, basically any article also has exemptions criteria, and I think we'll play ball on several of those. if you have a very clear, transparent operating model, and there is little to no risk, and you have your processes there, then it's likely that we'll get exempted from it. But that's what it says. But again, like Peter's saying, we honestly don't know, and I don't even think they know yet because they haven't processed a lot of licenses.
Yeah. It's almost making it up as they go along, I guess.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, as far as like costs associated with this, are we talking something significant? Is it like the cost of like a couple pints at the end of the day? Is it a cost of like a massive, it's like almost like doubling the cost, the operating costs, or like what kind of thing are we looking at?
Yeah, so you remember this? Well, I don't know if you saw that at ETHM, right? But Sali, he did a presentation around Mika and compliance, and his best guess was around 25,000 euros to get things moving. Given that we produce most of it ourselves, and he, as a lawyer, would basically need to sign off that what we're doing is sufficient, and then we obviously need. Hopefully not too many auditors moving in and confirming that the way we're saying we're doing it, the way the lawyer states that it's okay enough, that we can then prove and report and have that evidence in place. So that was Satri's ballpark estimate back at ETHDAM. So one of the guys we connected with.
Yes. Now,
so
are you still chatting with him today?
I have him on LinkedIn, but I haven't chatted him up recently. But he's one. We basically have two go-to guys. I think this is one of them, and the other one is with the Danish law firm where we've cooked with. So those would be.
Speak with him in the last few months, separately from I guess CrowdNode, just sort of feeling out what it would take to do a conversation on, get like a legal opinion on Dash as a whole. That then could be presented to these kinds of things. And so it sounds like we would probably, unless someone has a better idea, we would probably go for him if we wanted to, do something like that in the future. And of course, with our small shoestring budget and everything else we're going on, there's obviously priorities. But at some point that might be very, very important. So that's basically kind of what it would cost to get the ball rolling. And it's kind of funny where like the DAO is an interesting thing because people ask for money and they get things. And a lot of times when people, the DAO will let people proceed and then they'll say, wait, I don't want to pay for that. And so that can be kind of a challenging thing. From what I hope that the entirety of the DAO is very aware of is that CrowdNode's kind of been like a public service for the DAO, more than a profitable company, And
I know.
Yeah.
I prepared a few slides on that, but go on, Joel, and I can show that afterwards.
Yes. So basically, there's a lot of benefit that has come from CrowdNode that has not been commensurate with the profit the CrowdNode's gotten. And so it's almost like, in my mind, a cost to continue providing the public service rather than, some company wants to do some special regulatory thing. And why do we need to pay for that? We don't want to pay for extortion or whatever it is. And, that's not exactly a very nuanced perspective. That's a little biased on my point of view, but it seems to be kind of like a reality type thing where, CrowdNode has offered a product at cost or below cost, largely, for years. That has been a very good benefit for the Dash ecosystem, and now like the costs have gone up, so the costs are more visible. Whereas if CrowdNode had found a way, if CrowdNode had taken a whole lot of money in profits over the last few years, it would just be like, maybe the prices will go up a little bit in order to take on this extra cost, but otherwise the DAO wouldn't need. The only reason the DAO is even talking about this is because the DAO has gotten basically a freebie for a long time.
I mean, if the price of Dash had stayed where it was when we launched, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
No.
That's just, but that's true for a lot of things.
Yes. Yeah, for
But yeah,
sure.
But I mean, but I think I just want one point, which is trivial, but I think it should be made, is that hopefully this will not be a recurring thing that sort of happens every 6 months, that now there's a new thing that we need to be compliant with, and we need to go through some kind of paperwork and lawyers back and forth shenanigans again. Now, honestly, that might happen because you never know. But the only thing we know for sure is that right now this Mika is on the table, and we need to manage that. And then hopefully we can get to a place where we can dodge further bullets, at least because we're small, right? I mean, it's very obviously we're sort of a hobby company, not a big enterprise.
Yeah. So basically, yeah, that'll make sense. Now a couple of different ways this could go. So first of all, what are the prospects for CrowdNode of, now that I'm playing sort of the devil's advocate here, what are the prospects of CrowdNode of being able to simply transition to a more profitable company in the near-ish future, like next year or so, without a massive improvement in the price? So for example, let's just napkin math. What if instead of 15%, CrowdNode doubled that to 30%? Oh, and which I think if you get 70% of your staking rewards instead of 100, I still think off the top of my head as like a user thinking about that stuff, if it's either 70% or you don't stake at all, I still think I don't think you'd have a lot of people closing their accounts and withdrawing. You would have some, but still. So how would that change things if you just doubled the price, doubled the fees?
Yeah, I brought a few examples here. So first, just showing the as-is perspective, and why it's at least for some obvious that we're not a for-profit company indirectly and more a hobby perspective, right? So basic, very lean servers, app services, faucet, production and test the DAO environment, backups, login provider, bare necessities to operate. We have an operational expenditure, OPEX of 2,300 euros a month. And this does not include extraordinary costs that we also have, such as last year or the year before, we purchased CrowdNode.com through GoDaddy as a broker from a shady, didn't need to reveal his name type of guy that had it. That wasn't cheap. We also have a trademark registration, and we're also all on the other side of a process of that's also a couple of years ago being cooked by a law firm. So we have a lawyer we can use because they need to cook us as well, right? It doesn't include either that we have a yearly accounting audit. It doesn't include Masternode hosting, so the operating cost of those. There's no cost of salary included in these 2,300, and there's not even an occasional company beer included in that either. So just say that's the very lean OPEX cost.
Yes.
And
by the way, you should put you should register CrowdNode beer on DPNS, and every once in a while, if ever I buy a beer, I will tip CrowdNode beer and give the beer fund. It's a serious commitment. I would honestly buy every time I have a drink.
That's nice.
Every time I go out for a drink, CrowdNode gets a drink.
Much better than Patreon. Just
CrowdNode on.
So if we have a bit more than 2,000 users, but if we just assume that we have the 2,300 active members and users, that would be a baseline cost of €1 per month per user, per member. Remember, these things are not included, so more in reality, right? But let's assume €1 per month. The sort of average OPEX for running a masternode or master nodes. I've put in 20 per 1,000 dash that's hosted on a master node. It's an average between the different node types and different providers. So it is slightly cheaper end of day and on average, but 20 is a good round number to do the following. So if we assume that the network has an API of 10% with a mixture of normal nodes and Evo nodes, hopefully more eventually, the 1 dash member would get 0.1 dash in ROI per year. That's 0.015 dash for CrowdNode. With an exchange rate of 21 euros per dash, that's a monthly turnover on less than 2 cents per year per month for that user.
Yeah.
And our cost is €1 because that was what we set as a baseline cost, and then 0.02, which is basically the 1 dash out of the 20 dash of 1,000 cost per running it. So the 1 dash member cost us €1 per month to support. Bear in mind, we actually go even lower. If you have more than a half dash, you can stake it on CrowdNode. And fast forwarding, I won't dive into the calculations as deep, but the 10 dash member type, it's almost also €1. It's a bit better, but still bad. The 50 dash member, we're down to losing 69 cents per month to maintain that member. The 100 dash member, we're still losing money. So that's how much of a sort of investment and underlying hobby we are, and that it's basically not profitable unless we have many members with far more than 100 dash. So shedding some light into sort of your question, what could the possible future look like? And setting 30% as a sort of new baseline is an idea. We've discussed this vigorously amongst us as well. I'm a fan of a sort of ladder model, where the more you have, the cheaper it gets, right? So I've tried to sort of calculate a possible future where for a 1 dash member type, it's 50% fee. Doesn't change a lot. We're still losing money, but this is sort of a way to support the community and onboarding newcomers to Dash, and possibly even someone that might not have a lot of wealth that we, for more holistic reasons, want to help. Going to the 10 Dash member, where we could maybe set a 40% fee, would still lose money on that, €0.50 per month, but much less. And then possibly going into the profitable scenario is the 50 Dash members with a 30% fee, the fee percentage you proposed. That would make us profitable with 62 cents per month. And obviously the 100 Dash member scenario. So sort of a fee ladder that could turn us into being more self-sustainable in terms of profitability. But these are significant increases in our fee structure. And the sort of only sweetening the deal part of it would be to motivate trustless, which again, non-custodial, which again is a good story in terms of MiCA and compliance. That would look like this for 100 Dash trustless member. Would still lose money on that, but let's jump into a 500 Dash trustless member. We would have a result of €2.1 per month. So it doesn't take a genius to gather that we're still not cash flow positive. But going for a rather significant increase in terms of our fee structure might even be necessary anyways.
Yeah,
for us
sure.
to survive, let alone fund a MiCA license without help.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, we're talking about two different things. One is to turn CrowdNode into a at least at the very core OpEx level, sort of cash flow neutral or slightly cash flow positive business. That would be nice. And then we can always dream of the day that you can actually get a salary from it. Would be even nicer. But as you can see from this calculation, that's not in the cards just yet. But the other thing is the Mika license, which is sort of more like, in my mind, more like an OpEx than a CapEx. Sorry, more like
CapEx,
the other way around. It's more like
a one-off.
Yes, it's a one-off. So it's like a capital expenditure here and now that doesn't actually directly relate to the more operational picture here. Unless we have to do licenses every year or two, then that would be a nightmare. But then, of course, the steady state has to pay for that as well somehow. I personally, I'm not saying I disagree with Andreas on this, but I really like our very simple fee structure, where it's very sort of no nonsense. You don't have to worry about what tier you are, blah blah blah. Keep it simple. But I'm also at the same time. So this latter may or may not be a good idea. We could also just increase the fee to some higher flat fee. But I really also like the idea of having a substantial financial carrot for the trustless stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'm honestly a little bit disappointed that we still have so relatively few trustless fraction of the Dash that we hold, or whatever you want to call it, that we manage in trustless. It would be so nice if 80% of it was in trustless. And that would also give us a very strong argument for all this regulatory stuff that, we're not actually managing people's money. We just help them set this up in some sense.
Yeah. Right. So what I would like, I have some, I guess, opinions from just the general user perspective, but not, again, doesn't make sense financially necessarily. So a 50% type fee, I think is something that should only be reserved for something that people really, really want. When you're paying 50%, it almost feel psychologically, the number feels like people are like losing money. It's like, well, I'm losing half my money. And so, like, for example, I think in a tax bracket, if people pay like 30 to 40% of their income in tax, that's a lot.
That sounds nice. Yes.
Yeah, but that's a lot, but it still feels like, it feels like you're making money. If you pay 49, 50%, when it gets really close to 50%, it feels like you're a slave. Like the feeling, the emotional feeling, even though it's just a percentage difference, it feels like at that point. And then when you're over that percent, now
you are familiar with the tax bracket in Denmark, right?
Yes.
Nope.
Like 50% would be fantastic.
Yeah,
we're way above that.
It's insane.
It is insane. But you get used to it after, I don't know, 30 years.
Yeah, also it's because you have no choice, but also it's because maybe the attitude in Europe is a little bit different, as opposed to like you feel like you're paying for services rather than you're just losing all your money, which is a little bit of both, I guess. But I guess my point is, from a customer perspective, I would say you should probably I would say trusted should probably be around 30% fee. Like, I think that 70% still feels like you're getting most of your money. When you get to 60 anything, it starts, or below, that starts to psychologically not feel like a good deal. And so if you're like, from my perspective, 70% feels as good as 85%, just from like a psychology standpoint, where it's just like,
but
okay,
it makes a heck of a difference.
Yeah, I'm making I'm making, this is all, we haven't polled anyone, right? But this is just my gut feeling. If someone, I feel like you will lose a statistical 0 customers by having a 30% fee, by letting them keep 70% in, there will be some, but it'll be very low, I think. I mean, of course, imagine you change this and then you lose like most.
I will just blame you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're like, what
Joel, you said that.
Yeah. So what I would say is, 30% across the board, even if they're like a large 500 dash or more holder, or they're like even if they have over 1,000 dash in custodial, just because they want to take part of the Evo nodes or whatever, or they just don't want to host master nodes or whatever. Even then, I think 30% for any amount should be good, just a one flat rate. And for trustless, then you'd want like a 15% rate, just to motivate people, because at that point, also, people don't like fees increasing. It's not that they don't like high fees; they don't like it increasing. But if you increase, it feels like, hey, I was getting this deal, now I get a worse deal. Oh, this sucks. But if you say we're trying to encourage people to do trustless, now all of a sudden it doesn't feel like you increased your fees, even though you did. You're just like, well, you can still have the old fee if you're trustless. It's just that we're charging a not your keys, not your coins premium to give you a lesson. It's like it's a fine. It's a fine for not setting up trustless.
Custodial fee.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
So,
that's
what do you
basically
think about that?
exactly what we were discussing internally. That you can still have the 15% if you make the swap, but then of course we'll be ambivalent about it, because then it's kind of a bad deal for us if everybody makes the swap. No, it would still be great, but it would. Yeah, it would be interesting to see how many people take the fee so seriously that they would sort of be bothered and go trustless. I actually don't know how to predict that, but a couple of years ago I would have said many more than I probably would say now, because we've done the trustless, and in its own right, it has a lot of obvious advantages. The trustless as it is, even at the same fee. And yet most people just go with a more convenient option of not bothering. So I guess laziness for the win.
Yes, and I have to say, like, laziness is worth money. Like, it literally is, because that's why people have delivery fees for products delivered to their house. That's why you pay. That's why people pay housekeepers and other things like that. Is just convenience to save time. So the convenience of one click, I mean, I actually think that, like, to be more realistic, like 5 to 10% fee for trustless, 30% for trusted makes more sense for like the amount of effort and care that's required to do trustless right now. But it's probably better to just do two rates, 30% and 15%. Now, here's some questions on that. How does this equation change if there's protocol level changes that make trustless masternodes much easier to aggregate?
Yeah, that's a good question. When might this happen?
I don't know.
No. Depending on the solution, we would, with a protocol level implementation, basically be turned into a matchmaking service, and maybe have some masternodes in HotSwap ready to launch. If enough in the matchmaking service match to a new pool of 1,000, or if someone wants to get out of a pool and take a slot with, I don't know, 100 dash share. I think that's sort of one of the protocol level changes we could be looking at. So that in turn might reduce some of our cost. At least it would definitely reduce the concern around having the custodial processes in place that we put a lot of effort in to make sure that our members' funds are safe. So to some extent, from at least a headache perspective, and going to bank vaults to fetch keys and stuff like that will ease operations and be in itself a good argument for maybe keeping the fees lower. But again, where's the dash price in a year from now? I think that's the real interesting question, right? If someone promised me a dash price of 100 in a year, then we can keep it at 15, and I'll what do you call, what's the expression? It's been built in.
But tighten the belt.
Tighten the belt, right? Because
Yeah.
then we will be profitable with a 15% fee. Possibly not enough to Lambo Moon style it, but maybe just at least a couple of beers now and then again, right? But I actually tried to do a simple roadmap, and I put it in there and on it because I think there's a couple of natural steps that we can take before that happens, assuming it happens, or to a couple of natural steps to do anyways. Because this is, it's no secret that the current trustless setup is cumbersome. You need to know what you're doing, at least to some extent, and I really want to mitigate that. So if we were to look at a roadmap, I don't know if it's a good time, but at least at some point today, then we can do that. But yeah, I think the price of operating nodes, the price of doing the distribution of the rewards, unless that's also done on protocol level, that requires computational power, and if we need to store records of how we did it and all that stuff, then it also requires storage. And if that needs to be compliant, then
Yeah, for sure.
It's not free.
Yeah. So on another, I guess, element of this, what kinds of thoughts have you guys given to expanding the business to do more things so it's more of a business and less of a public service for Dash? And of course, I think that right now, CrowdNodes is probably serving Dash the best it can. I think that the Dash community is like, there's no more utility to be given to the Dash community. You already do plenty enough. But as far as other Masternode projects, hosting things for them, or other staking services, or those kinds of things, has there been any thought in kind of expanding it to be more of a business and less of just a public service for Dash?
We've had talks around how we could expand the CrowdNode endeavor. Absolutely. To me, it always correlates with what effort does it require manually to do something else afterwards. The perspective of CrowdNode that I really love is that more or less everything is automated. The few daily support tickets, approving larger withdrawals, that's and then answering questions. That's what the job is. The rest is just operating itself. When we need to take down a node, it's a bit cumbersome. We need to gather the keys, bring them out of code storage. But besides that, the platform is just running, doing its job. And it's not given that we can sort of build the same automation for other services in the community.
Because the problem is we all have full-time
jobs,
engagements with other things.
Yeah.
Thankfully, to make a living, right? So if we were to do something in this space, it would have to be good enough that you could actually make a reasonably reliable living. And that's a far cry from CrowdNode, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on its surface, it does seem like conceptually, it seems like an easy, profitable side gig, because you're like, oh well, you just kind of like run nodes for people and then take a percentage of like the money that already comes in. Yay, free money. But then, of course, in practice, it hasn't turned out that way at all for a variety of reasons. So when you've had just a random thought, when you had the chart of the amount of Dash in CrowdNode over time, have you kept track of the purchasing power, basically the value of the Dash in CrowdNode over time? How has that changed? Because obviously, supply goes up, price goes down. And at what point is it total value still going
Calculate
down? The
product
total value is
two.
flat. Is it up? What is it?
Yeah,
I don't know that we've done the calculation, but I wouldn't be surprised if the curve turns out to be very flat. I mean, basically, what you do is you would take sort of the market price and multiply by whatever your total on the platform, and plot that as a function of time. Andreas is playing now in some plotting tool, but I don't know if we have the necessary data to do that. Do we have the
if you just keep talking a little bit more, I might be able to produce it.
In principle, it's a trivial thing, but my gut feeling is that we would have seen a big increase in the beginning, where we went from 0 to 10, and then maybe 10 to 20 masternodes, because that happened relatively quickly. So hopefully the price didn't tank immediately. Well, actually it did, but I think we outpaced it. And then after that, I wouldn't be too surprised if it's sort of wobbled around whatever level it's at now, which would be, what are we at, 130K times 20 something euros, right?
Yeah, so there's obviously, price is the biggest indicator of all this. But then, of course, you have supply of Dash that exists, which, as more comes out, then there's going to be more available to put into this stuff. Then, of course, you have Masternode rewards have been constantly declining because the block rewards been going down. And then you had the reallocations, which have kind of reversed that trend a little bit, especially with the whole Evo node thing. And then, of course, that's on a constant slide downwards because 7% down every year. But then maybe we have a flurry of activity on the Evo chain, which adds a bunch of fees in, where before we had basically like no fees at all, like very few in the network. And maybe then we have a price bump. Who knows what's going to happen? But there's a lot of uncertainty.
It's so difficult to predict. And it very well could happen that everything just goes crazy, and then nobody would be complaining at that point, right? And it just it is just so hard to predict. But I will say that we have to to survive long enough that we get to the final result where it works out better, right? You can easily run out of money on the way to a good situation. What are we?
Yeah, so I just did a correlation of it.
But there's no unit on the y-axis.
No, there's no unit on right now, but that's euros basically. I could put an axis on it. So basically, over time, the total wallet and the average euro price in the time index still gives us a growth, and this is starting back in 2018. So just looking at Dash, it was a much steeper curve. Oh, I'm not sharing. Let me do like this. I have to. Oh, sorry. Let's do like this. You're right.
Working on it.
Let's see. Like that. So it's not a steep, but it's still going up. So yeah.
So where are we? What does that say?
We're here in 3.2 million euros in assets under management.
That sounds.
And 5 years ago, we were at 700,000 euros.
So yeah, you could see there's like a very brief moment where it stalled out and kind of went down a little bit, and then just kept on going up. Yeah, because I think that when you have the price pumping, everyone wants to stake, and then when the price starts to not pump, the interest wanes a little bit. But then the flatness over the period of time, I think, has had a lot of people it's just more market saturation at this point. It's not even like trends of people get in and out. It's just that CrowdNode was new, and now over time, there's just the word gets out, more people build habits. There's more people also view Dash as the people in Dash I feel today are very much long-term people. It's so, as opposed to in the early days, like it's like in terms of like face attrition, as in faces I see in the community who I don't see anymore. From 2016 to 2018, there's a lot of faces that are just like gone, just people that just aren't there anymore. But from like 2019 on to today, especially 2020 to today, there's almost all the same faces. Like they haven't gone anywhere, like the people who remain. And so I think that like it's kind of there's a very strong advantage in being like a Bitcoin or a Litecoin or a Dash that's been around for so long. There's certain minimum performance type of kind of expectations. And I found that as far as like our organic, I would say like our organic user growth has not really existed, over the years. There has not been a lot of like a ton of new users, but there's been a lot of like legacy, like from being around and I think even Bitrefill mentioned this in their report on transaction volumes that basically just says that there's a lot of coins that have just been around, like Dash and Litecoin, for example, that have just been around for so long that there's constant legacy volume because of that. So at least there's like there is a certain advantage, I guess, to bottoming out, because when you bottom out, you sort of like you hit a very strong floor, whereas like the hype can't get lower and you lose users. We're already there. This is what we have. We can at least count on this much, and then anything beyond that is good.
Yeah, but I think this I mean, everything has to, well, almost everything has to do with narrative, right? And there's all the people that are excited about whatever's the latest, greatest project. I mean, all the Solana people or whatever that's in vogue in this cycle. There's always this narrative that all of these coins you mentioned, like Dash and Litecoin and everything. Well, for some exception, Bitcoin isn't counted because the rules don't apply to Bitcoin. But for everything else, including Ethereum, most importantly, it's like that. Yeah, that's old tech, right? With the new cool stuff that can do gazillion transactions per second, and let's not talk too much about decentralization and so on. It seems to be sort of the narrative and I think the real question is with something like Evolution coming out on an old boring coin like Dash that none of the cool kids have ever heard about. Is it possible, or what would be the strategy to actually break this story that these are first or second generation coins, they can't do what the new cool coins can do? Right?
Yeah, that's definitely a marketing issue that I'm thinking
Oh, absolutely. But this is really the key, because also if you want to attract developers to work on building on Evolution and so on, not just the get rich quick kids, but the people who actually build interesting stuff. They also somehow need to choose to spend the time developing on Dash and not on something else, right? That's the marketing that I think is going to be crucial.
Yeah, for sure. Especially because I feel like a lot of people have just forgotten Dash exists, and the good thing is when they hear it still does, they have a very positive opinion. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember you guys from back in the day. That was awesome. I remember."
Do you guys still exist?
Like it was like I remember I bought I used to own Darkcoin, man. Oh wow, that was back here. Or people will say like, I remember I had a big Dash, used to be one of my biggest holdings back in the day. I'm glad to see you guys are still here. I didn't know you were still here. So the negative is, oh, people forgot, but then the positive is there was a good impression still around. So that's a good thing to build on. As far as like the new tech, I think that if you're a Bitcoin based chain that just does that kind of stuff, there's only so much you get people to care. However, it is a long track record of existing and functioning, and that's very safe for an investment, I guess, or for something to use. And I feel like the fact that we're still in the game when we talk to companies like, for example, Spritz, and say, hey, can you accept us so users can use your service to pay bills and stuff like that. I feel like it's a lot easier of a pitch for a 10-year-old project than like a 1-year-old project that's just trying to grow everywhere because of that security. But definitely the fact that evolution isn't just features, it's a new chain that uses new style technology. And when we get smart contracts, that's going to be very important. I think that Sam's kind of mentioned this, that like a lot of developers don't want to build on it if it doesn't have it. But the other thing is, because I've obviously taken lots of explorations around the crypto world, and we're being very honest about there are some limitations that Dash has on a technical side. For example, privacy and ease of use of privacy need an update, and we're working on some of that kind of stuff. But then the other thing is trustless staking for small holders is something where Dash is behind, I would say. And then the other things, like as far as like we don't have fungible tokens yet. That'll be in a few weeks, I guess, right? But tokens like stable coins and stuff, all the modern blockchains have that. And as far as payment volume is concerned, Bitcoin is still the top in a lot of cases, or one of the top ones. It hasn't really grown much. The only things that are growing in payment volumes are stable coins overwhelmingly, and Litecoin a little bit. And so it seems like you need a stable coin if you're a modern payment coin. In fact, at conferences, a lot of people have been, when they're like, oh, you're in payments. Oh, okay, good. They always assume you're a stablecoin platform. And they're like, you mean you just send the native token? You're just like a gas token? Like, that's all you can send is gas? It's like, and I made a post a few weeks ago. It says, I transact exclusively in gas token because it's kind of what it is. And then you get to, so I think evolution in a lot of ways brings Dash up to, if with smart contracts, it kind of brings Dash to the modern era. However, the things that make it unique as far as the data storage solution, the provable queries that you don't have to trust an indexer for, and then you get the you get DAPI especially. Those solve problems that modern, like let's say Solana, does not have solved. And that's like, oh, this is actual new technology. And that's not just like oh yay, we love Dash because we're bag holders. You know, we're making up sweet lies to tell ourselves. Like, no, that's real things. Like, there's actual innovation that's happened. And I don't want to throw too much shade at, you know, competitors and things, but like, for example, Bitcoin Cash had the Cash tokens upgrade last year, which provided a lot of support for its price rise relative to where it was. It's kind of re-enabling the old opcodes that Satoshi disabled way back in the day, and adds some programmatic things and some cool features. It's a good upgrade, but it's not like, it doesn't advance the state of the art like Dash did. And so now I think that once we get smart contracts and stable coins, it will be like a fresh new blockchain. We just get to shill everywhere that also has that other, you know, the old legacy, like for the cypherpunks. Because the cypherpunks, they're still like what I would call like the Monero use case, where people want something that's not a bankster, CBDC, whatever. They want something that's like censorship resistant and sound money and private. And I think that if we can be like Monero plus Solana plus, or, you know, or let's just say Litecoin plus Solana, depending on the branding, those two together in the same chain plus some extra stuff that no one else can do, that's a great appeal of like, you don't need to use 3 blockchains. You can just use one, or 2 chains, but one overarching network.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
We discussed this the last time I was on the podcast. The element of decentralization. I know some people are very opinionated on that in the community, whether if the number of Evo nodes is large enough to call it decentralized. Is it sitting on too few hands and the service providers actually hosting them, etc.? I don't want to open that discussion. But some of the sort of obvious Web3 use cases that are there and operating today on other blockchains or side chains, right? Layer 2 change. They don't carry the same decentralization as platform does and will do. So in terms of that, I really look forward to what's happening during the next not only months but years in terms of solutions that can be built, the dApps that we can get out there. All the other things you mentioned are relevant as well, but in, the Web3 capabilities, I really find interesting as well.
Yeah, for sure. There's something. Someone actually asked this on X the other day, and it's just a random thought that I thought might be interesting moving forward. DAPI is very important for allowing developers to do things without trusting third parties. Technically, you could make DAPI extensible to other blockchains as well if Evo nodes were to run, obviously platform and core, and then also a Bitcoin node and also an Ethereum node, for example. You could have DAPI work for that as well. The problem is they're not paid. There's no profit in that. So if there was a way to charge, if there was a way to monetize that, then maybe it would be like, oh, everyone can use DAPI and Evo for their other chains as well. And that could be interesting. Again, it's far from where we're at right now, as far as like we're just trying to make our shit work, but it could be something where you get other people involved before that so that they don't have to make those trust trade-offs. Just like I do think that as soon as DPNS and DashPay can be used to associate with other cryptocurrency wallets, like now I want Dash usernames and contact lists to be the standard for all cryptos, for all payments, for everything. And that's trickier, but at least it does still provide a lot more transactions on the Evo chain to register identities and things like that, So,
but I just want to touch on something, and we touched on this as well down at ETHM. So let me just share this. There's a lot of information on the slide, but oh, that was the wrong one. Window, where is it? This one. So just sort of a high level, wishful roadmap. Mika has obviously highlighted there. We talked about a couple of things, withdrawal and distribution, and a lot of people have voiced that they want to have Evo trustless shares as well. But I want to make this completely, non-custodial, meaning that it never has to touch our platform for it to be staked. And for that, we obviously need an API as well. Then there's the maybe custodial KYC part that depends on the Mika outcome, right? But at least for that to be successful with a 100% non-custodial solution where it never touches a CrowdNode wallet, the obvious one is by providing an API that is integrated into wallets. So nobody has to do the signing manually and understand what happens, because the truth is, if it never has to go through our platform, it's at least twice as complex as what users are going through today, more likely 3 times as complex. But by, let's say, integrating into the mobile wallet or basically any other wallet that's out there that's true to Dash and would want this, we would be able to provide a solution for that. But there's also an Easter egg, right? With platform, we're able to do tokens. So and avoid at least the custodial part potentially, and that's by issuing staked Dash tokens. So as an alternative to the protocol level with slots of shares that can be changed, maybe 50 or 100 Dash chunks, or I don't know the design of it in detail. What if you're a 1 Dash saver and you still want to go for trustless? A staked Dash token could be a way forward. at least I can do a hypothesis on how that could work, right? But it's might be far fetched to talk about right now. But there are other options to help bring it in. But basically, a V2 setup of the trustless today, and forgive me for lack of designing this slide nicely, right? It's I think it's imperative that we get to sort of any amount staking point. More important than any duration, right? But it has to be 100% non-custodial. The UX needs to be real time and more integrated, definitely into wallets for ease of use.
I mean, basically, the ideal situation for this would be if you could make it such that a little bit like what we have the swipe to stake feature in the Dash mobile wallet now. But instead of if you do that, that goes sort of into the regular pool of Dash on CrowdNode, which is of course trusted. But if you do something that has the same user experience, but behind the scenes is trustless, that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's kind of the ultimate thing, is the one-click staking. And I think that I would probably say a lot of CrowdNode's growth has been because of wallet integrations that made it easy. And if you're able to do that with the value proposition of non-custodial staking, I think that that's a big thing. Some people, like for example, in the past, I know XKCD has been a little bearish on the idea that this would change. People don't care. I don't think people care, but they do. They care. Just like, for example, when I think it was late 2022, I don't remember when exactly, when I ran the Brave ad campaign, the first one. We're going to do the second one in the 7th of next month, which will be nice. But we got a lot of attention, and the biggest thing people asked for is the staking. Oh, how do I stake? How do I stake? And almost everyone was like, whoa, it's custodial? Oh, like, even some people did then go for it anyway, but they wanted it to be non-custodial. Even if I don't think they really cared, but it's just like, it's like the shiny thing that people like, and you
Yeah.
like, even if it is centralized, you don't want to admit it is, So they, at the very least, I mean, I think there's a good points on both sides about how much people actually care, but like people would rather, even if you can stake non-custodially, they will buy it to stake non-custodially and then stake it on Binance. But if you needed custody to stake it, they wouldn't buy it to begin with to stake on Binance. So it's kind of paradoxical how that works. But I do think that would really help if you can just click and then there you go.
But taking it to, from proof of service, which it basically is today, to just proof of stake, that's a different journey altogether for Dash, right? If we were to add some, you could say, really protocol level staking stuff that's not relevant or related to a service behind the scenes. But yeah.
Yeah, that could be huge. So the only other question kind of I had before, and by the way, if anyone wants to throw some questions into the comments and stuff, one actually interesting question that Splowik had, he said, what's the longest trustless masternode on CrowdNode? Like, what's the one that's been around the longest?
That's a good question. Let me take a look. Trustless. So the longest one running collateral funded, that was the third one that was launched. That was launched the 1st of November 23.
So almost a year.
Almost a year.
Nice.
Yes.
Well, that's good.
So much for the login period, right? I get that question all the time. So will I get it back after the? No. It's free to request your funds back after that period of login, right? But yeah, for a year, is the oldest one. The second oldest one is. No, wait, sorry. It was in a different format here. The oldest one is actually the 11th of January. 23.
That sounds more.
Yeah. Sorry, I just confused the. So it's been running for far longer time than a year, and the second longest is from April 23. So
So we have a couple of 1.5-year-old nodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
possibly
That's
more.
a good thing. So it gets the other thing is the for the Mika subject. You did mention before in the pre-proposals channel, at least, some kind of external benefits or effect this has on Dash as a whole, rather than just we need this license to keep on doing business, or keep on doing charity more accurately. But we not just we need this license for CrowdNode, but it's also this could help with the regulatory picture for Dash as a whole. So do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I do. I think the point would be not basically from a community standpoint side of things, put blanks in the map of the world. EU being the second largest market. If someone in the Dash community don't try to challenge what are the actual options of getting a Mika license, what is required of us, then for other smaller service providers, that's going to be even more difficult to do. So I think us being one of the larger players in the Dash community, it's obvious that we try our best to at least sort of explore this new frontier, especially to not make Dash obsolete in the European market already before Mika is actually in effect, because everyone is looking towards compliance when it's related to a service that's provided within EU. We signed up with Swapin ourselves. You did some excellent groundwork there. That process took more than 2 months for us to get through it, because they had to do their due diligence of us. They had to understand it, and if it's this difficult to engage with European businesses, then I foresee that with a Mika license, it will be like, we are licensed. All right, there you go. You're onboarded.
Exactly.
So we're trying to sort of break the frontier and try to lead and maybe even steer the way of other Dash-funded organizations by basically, when we have these protocols and processes and report requirements in place, that we can share those with others that want a piece of the European market. End of day, if no one services the European market, that's the second largest market. That's then, not in reach of Dash. Compared to the New York bid license, right? We don't want to leave too many blank spots on the map of the world, right?
For sure.
So I think that would be the overarching sort of benefit to try to challenge what's possible and what will be accepted by the Danish FSA in this case, but basically by any FSA across Europe, if we can get some what's it called, precedence, something like that, right? Across the board, because I know there are all other European service providers in the Dash community that will also need a Mika license. They might try to duck and cover, but it's not without risk to do a duck and cover approach. So basically minimizing this risk, making Dash more attractive. If one Dash company has a Mika license, then why shouldn't other companies get it? Or at least, why should exchanges worry about keeping Dash listed if it is actually possible to run a business that operates with Dash? So I think it can be used as a good narrative in really many situations. So I do know it's a bit sought to sort of it's an obvious thing for CrowdNode, but subsequently I think it's also an obvious thing for Dash to have some companies that use Dash that has Mika licenses.
Yeah. So, for example, let's just say you were able to get the license and everything works out. let's then expand to throw a name out. OKX, right? OKX used to list Dash, does not anymore at all, I don't think, but especially because of certain countries. I believe France is one of those big ones. So what are the possibilities of then going to OKX and saying, hey, or BitGet or one of these other big exchanges and saying, okay, well, listen, we only deal with Dash. That's our only coin we deal with, and we have a Mika license. We're operating. OKX, you should be fine. You should be able to go to the regulator and say, we're supporting Dash now, and CrowdNode already does this. Would that be a possibility, or is it more complicated than that?
So it's obviously a bit more complicated than that, because if it's a copy paste, then they would need to follow our one address principle, right? But besides that, I think we can possibly not marginalize the risk of using Dash and having it on an exchange, but at least explain it in greater detail. And the obvious provider that we would go to is obviously Coinify. That's a Danish company, right? With a lot of white label solutions out there. And they delisted the Dash, I think, immediately after the conference in Zurich back in 2019, which was kind of hilarious, right? Because they were making promises back then. But those guys are afraid of the regulatory things related to the mixing and private send capabilities. But if we can sort of prove that there's possibilities to mitigate those risks, then why not pursue the agenda of getting Dash relisted? So I definitely believe that a Mika license on a Dash only service could be a stepping stone and at least a very valid argument towards other service providers within EU or service providers that service EU citizens.
Yeah. I wonder if now, obviously, this is going to sound like being a cheapskate here, but of course that's what I am. I like to do the most with the least amount of money. I wonder if when engaging a lawyer to help get this license, such as the one we already mentioned, I wonder if we could, at the same time, get a legal opinion letter written up about Dash and its privacy function and how it's able to be compliant under Mika law, and kind of not have to pay for those two things separately, kind of like get a group discount because of all that, because there might be some repetition work. And so in which case, I wrote a post on the forum and Reddit and stuff about Dash's path back to the top, and I outlined a bunch of things that I think that we need to work on, that we are working on, and one of these things, of course, is the European market. And part of what that would require would be getting a lawyer to write up a legal opinion and then going for there. And so I was, of course, dreading having to ask the network for money for this, because I'm just like all this stuff. But then it's like, oh, CrowdNode existential threat, plus we can get this too. That to me sounds, better, and I'm really happy to not have to spend that money out of my own budget, even though it's from the DAO budget.
Joel, do you remember back in the Ryan Taylor period? I mean, he had a lot of a lot of things going on with this sort of a quest to prove that there was nothing you can do with Dash that you can't manually, if you want to, do with Bitcoin. So at the protocol level, the argument was that Dash was not really more of a privacy coin than Bitcoin was. Yes. And this argument was did they sort of demonstrate this technically? Yes. And I think there was also something involving some kind of law. I actually forget the details because it's been a while, but I think somebody did something like that. Of course, there was no such thing as a Mika license at the time, but this was done for some particular audience.
Yes, I forget to which regulators, but I do know.
But I mean, maybe it was indirectly. Maybe it was to convince exchanges not to delist Dash as a sort of a panic reaction to, let's just take all privacy coins, quote unquote, and just treat them the same. And but the thing is that I think that some of that, from the technical point of view, some of that argument was made very thoroughly at the time.
Yeah. So the situation is, I guess, shifted a little since then. First of all, the early days of crypto, no one knew what it was. You could do whatever you wanted because that's just what it was. Then we hit this time somewhere around 2019, 2020 especially, where there started to become serious crackdowns on crypto, but in a very uneducated way. And that's where that came from, that era where having the word privacy or privacy and the P word anywhere on a website, that's it. You're done. You're a known privacy coin. You can't be. And that's.
Yeah, exactly.
And unfortunately, and I have to say, this is, like my opinion after having dealt with this for a lot recently, right? The strategy of fighting back against that, and I have to be very fair, is if I was running things or whatever you would call back then, I'm not sure how differently I would have acted from the way people like Ryan Taylor did act. It seemed to be this one of the things to do, but it didn't work at all. Basically, because there's too much wording out there, too many people saying, "Oh yeah, remember dark coin, privacy coin, the P word everywhere," and so there's just no fighting that. And you go and talk to projects, and they say, like an exchange, "Oh, we're going to delist you." No, really, we're no more private than Bitcoin. Well, then why does this Cointelegraph article call you a privacy coin? And then it's just like, it's done. You can't argue, but you can't be like, well, but look, our website, they're done. So it did not work in anything except for, I believe, was it Bittrex was like the only exchange that relisted Dash and then shut down. So I was like, damn it. Like the one victory. Now, on the other hand, the phrasing of no more private than Bitcoin has been extremely costly for Dash's reputation, where every time I talk to anyone who remembers Dash from the years, who has a positive reputation, 3 out of 4 times they instantly bring up privacy as a benefit. As like, oh yeah, I remember Dash back in the day. Oh yeah, like I love the old school privacy coins, and privacy is super important. Like that's what they associate positively with Dash. The reason to not have it over something like Litecoin, which oddly enough, Litecoin has a more thorough privacy solution than Dash does today. It's kind of funny how that works, but they're also leaning into that very heavily. And I think we paid a massive price for almost no benefit, which, and I'm being very fair to say that I don't know if we knew that back then, but it's kind of seems to be the outcome today. And now the privacy coin thing seems to be much more of a, first of all, PayPal's stablecoin has privacy functions that Dash does not currently today, which is of confidential transactions, of hiding the amounts so that you can see that you paid someone, but you can't see the amount. And PayPal is extremely well regulated as far as like one of the 7, I believe, assets that any New York-based company can just start listing without explicitly asking for permission. Even Litecoin, they have to ask for permission to list from the regulators. And so it's changed, but also I feel like the concerns from regulators are more specific now. It's not privacy, bro. What does that mean? They just say we want to make sure that in exchange, if you receive illicit funds, you can get rid of them. You can refund them if you need to, or if it's not compliant tainted, you can refund them. And if Dash Coin join, if you refund one of the addresses it came from, it will still be in the possession of whoever sent it. So you can still do that. And then on the other side of things, if they want to be able to prove origin of the funds, that's where they do the I can't remember what the specific regulation was or whatever, but they basically would make you sign a transaction saying, I hereby own this address. And you can't really do that with something like, say, Monero, or say a Zcash shielded address, I own this address because no one can see what's in it. So that's why Zcash and Firo had to do something called an exchange only address, where you had to send from a transparent address so they could at least sign and say, this is, I certified this is my address.
Exactly.
And so now that there's a case, I think that we could make a very strong case for Dash being able to be used in a compliant manner now that we know what the guardrails are, I guess. So yeah, that's the privacy thing, and hopefully, if we get to just say, look, what I would like to not say anymore is that Dash does not have any privacy features, and that Dash is not no greater than Bitcoin in this regard, because both are. I mean, that's kind of a technicality, yes, but also technicality, no, because it's it's an actual protocol level thing, and it works better. But also, I'd like to get around saying, like, no, you treat Bitcoin well, treat us well, and to actually be more specific and say your requirements are X, Y, Z. We are able to fulfill those requirements.
Exactly.
And just switch the thinking to not be begging for mercy, but to be showing that we can be used in a legit way.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. But the historical situation is also very unfortunate. Like, you just hammer everything with the word privacy in it for no real reason. But if you call it Mimble Wimble instead, that nobody knows what the hell that means, then you're fine. You have but that was probably just a point in time where that was the case.
Yeah, and also I think a lot of it has to do with initial reputation. So if you add a privacy feature later on, as long as you don't call it like, the laundry or something like that, as long as you don't call it some stupid name like that, no one even notices if you added something. But if you started out with this, then they're like, oh, you must still be naughty.
But yeah, I actually feel that the relisting or enlisting on new services is possibly not as much a privacy, piracy, whatever, a concern, that it's a volume concern, right?
It has to actually make business sense.
The point is, we've been, dropping the ranks from being almost a top 10, or at least a top 10 coin, to not even a top 100 coin anymore, right? So for any exchange or any service to add Dash, they would need to have some sort of proof of profitability, at least eventually. And the trend of Dash doesn't have a good narrative right there. And I think Evo and platform can turn that around for old friends to no longer be foes, but come back because they see profit. And also, if they see profit, I think they're more likely to engage and try to understand why we are compliant, or how we can at least be compliant, right? Instead of just saying, oh, well, not worth our time. So that's the fortune wheel that I'm looking at right now. That's the success of platform, and the possibilities there to get the price narrative back, and then also be able to hopefully bring more services just because of that.
Yeah, and there's another side of things where the Evo chain itself does not have, it's not a UTXO model, it's an account-based model, so you don't have different addresses every single time you receive or whatever. And also doesn't have that explicit privacy function in the credit transfers. And so there's also another perspective of, what if we went to exchanges and say, can you support this chain? Yeah. And that's where we're going to have all our stable coins on, all our other things. And of course, if we do end up getting EVM capable smart contracts, as I'm sure you remember from the conference and everything, the Railgun project can work on that chain and provide basically the very highest levels of privacy. Now, that what Railgun has done is different, because they don't want to go to prison like the Tornado Cash people, which is very smart, which Tornado Cash should not have had to end up there anyway. Yeah. Is they have something called privacy pools, where if say someone hacks an exchange, and then the address gets flagged by whatever, and they send the money into the Railgun contract, it'll eject the money out. But if you're not associated with that clearly, then it's just free to use. So it's a way of like specifically excluding known criminal activity to basically have the assumption of we don't know anyone's financial activity in this pool other than that it's not associated with a known criminal. And other than that, it's all there. And so maybe, again, doing their best, right?
Yeah, but that was the vibe at the conference. If you knew that you weren't doing anything wrong, then everything was fine. But from at least prosecution perspective, that might be a point you can prove in a court of law. But from getting a license to operate, that's not the same.
Yeah, of course.
So I understand the perspective of the people building and the people having services, but not realizing the importance and the difference towards the principle of I know I'm not doing something wrong versus you need a license. And if you can prove you're not doing anything wrong, you will get the license.
Yeah, of course.
It's just hard work getting there because you need to prove it before you get the license.
Yeah. And now, of course, that's the challenge with you have a decentralized blockchain that should be you're building a tool for people to use, and an open source tool for an open tool for anyone in the world to use for whatever they want. And it has to be as useful as possible. And so the questions of compliance always come up because compliance is not a decentralized blockchain cannot be compliant in the same way a company can because it exists. Now, can it be used? Is it a tool that can be used in a compliant manner by people who need to do it that way? That's where the utility comes in. So the ability for compliance is just a utility aspect for users. And at the same time as things that might not be compliant is also a utility thing. Whereas if all transactional privacy of any kind was banned in, like, let's just say the EU only, and Dash removed that functionality for any kind of transactional privacy, then Dash would become maybe more useful to some people, but it becomes significantly less useful to a lot of people around the world. And where we as builders and promoters of this technology, which should be, which we call it administration agnostic. It should not care about laws, but it should be a tool that people who do care about laws or even people who care to live outside of the law should be able to find useful. It's a useful tool. And so that's where we have to kind of keep our thing is just to make sure to develop the most useful tool possible. And then people like me have to go and try to sell its utility to as many people as possible, including exchanges, and say, look, this is a tool. You can use it for this, that way, that way, that way. If you need to prove certain things, you can use it for this. Please, why don't you support this? Or other company, why don't you support that? And then other people, I can say, look, this is a tool which will give you a high degree of transactional privacy if used right for whatever you want to do, and no government can necessarily stop that. And while I tell you that you should probably pay all your taxes, etc., because jail is not a nice place, that's still your decision as a free-thinking individual. The tool is a tool. And then just some people might be like, oh, I love Dash because it's so dark. And okay, whatever. Don't highlight those people. Don't maybe advertise them too explicitly, but just Dash works, and just it has to work for everyone. Money for the world works for everyone and for everything they need.
I agree, and it's with a bias. I'm definitely conceptually a fan of privacy and fungibility and untraceability and all that, and even to a very extreme extent. But we're also facing a reality where the narrative needs to be different in the public space for Dash to be broadly accepted. And the flip side is, you mentioned it, right? as for on a privacy standpoint, Dash isn't the greatest best. So I'm not concerned with that feature anymore. I did vocal my opinion a couple of years back as myself and not as CrowdNode. And I strongly believe we should move it. And that was the 2020 era where the focus was basically on the word privacy, and then the door slammed, right? I don't feel we're there anymore. We can explain it. We can justify why it's there and the purpose of it. But the analogy, just because it can be used in a criminal transaction doesn't mean that it is, take cash, but they're trying to eliminate cash, which was also Peter's narrative, right? But just because I can rob a bank that doesn't mean I rob a bank, right? So you can basically use that silly analogy on anything and apply it. But that doesn't mean that you can persuade the Danish FSA to get a license. And you just need to prove the way you're doing it is okay.
Yeah, for sure.
And that goes with all use cases that you can possibly think of, also the ones that will be built dApps and on platform. But let's get back on how do we grow Dash as an ecosystem. That should be the focus of the next coming months and years. That's the new era we're in. When Evo answered, now let's start building.
And build all the tools that we need to make that happen. And for sure, one thing's for sure is the good thing about having a feature like that. I know there's a lot of discussions internally with the rollout of Evo in regards to privacy, of course, because the way it works today, if you want to top up an identity, create an identity on the Evolution chain, which then registers usernames and does the other stuff, you basically tie all your funds to that now in the top up transaction. So anyone observing Evo blockchain can say, oh, and whoever registers at CrowdNode now sees all that transaction history tied to it, which is a massive problem because Dash was pseudonymous, right? That on the main chain, it is pseudonymous. There's coins around. Sometimes they get mixed, sometimes they don't. No one knows who they belong to unless they explicitly say that. But if you tie that all to an identity that then does a username and all that, it's a massive privacy issue. And because of that, the core developers kind of refuse to just roll it out without some kind of a safeguard. And so as part of the safeguard, initially the idea was to add the CoinJoin functionality as a single use thing in the wallets, where the wallets would mix the entire balance and then would register an identity. And that's the only way that they could use that functionality in the wallets. But then complications arose from that. And then it became, okay, we're not releasing the wallets to register usernames without an integrated CoinJoin functionality. In fact, maybe next week or so, the mixing functionality is coming to the wallets ahead of the usernames, just to get people getting ready for this, so that when they register a username, they can have some basic financial privacy around that. And so it's starting to, like, everything's sort of moving together. And one thing that we don't, because privacy is a very broad issue, or there's a functionality that's in things like Bitcoin, for example. Sorry, you wanted to jump in there?
Yeah, because the paradox here is when you start tying identities to funds and data, there's another set of laws kicking in, the data protection regulative, the GDPR thing. I think it's Shield in the US or the equivalent. Anyways, it's much tighter in EU. So there's the paradox of, from a government perspective, you want transparency on financial transaction, and you want to be able to figure out who did those transactions. But at the other end of things, you can't disclose information that's related to a person, and some of the data that's related to a person, depending on the data, obviously. So there's conflicting interests there that makes the initial mixing at least obvious, because you can't provide software that give that kind of exposure, that's going to be another alarm clock being set off in EU, right? So we need to balance that, and I think they struck a good balance right now with the implementation at hand. But yeah, sorry I interrupted you, but that's a different set of compliance aspects you also need to take into account.
Yes. The only thing I wanted to say on that was that the existence of Dash Pay is considered, can technically qualify as what's called a stealth address, where there's legacy stealth addresses in Bitcoin, and there's also something newer called silent payments that uses some taproot, something to do whatever. But it's basically the same thing of like an address that when you send to the address, obviously on the blockchain, money has to go from a transparent address to a transparent address, but you don't actually expose those addresses to the greater public. And so they're still there on the blockchain, but there's no actual exposure. And so it's considered a massive privacy, or a non-trivial privacy increase to have that. And so by having Dash Pay, Dash does improve its privacy for the end user, especially if you have the mixing in the mobile wallets and all that, but all that in a very, I should say, non-cypherpunk branded way, in a much more just like regular way that's like safe and obvious kind of thing. So it's an interesting dance, because at the end of the day, we as crypto people, as people, decentralization advocates, etc., we are trying to build technology that will radically change the way people interact with their systems in a much more voluntary, equal, and free way. And there's always going to be conflicts between that and the way things are done now. We're trying to make the world better, not just a different version of the way it is today. And so it's always going to be a dance of like, how far can we push freedom and stay out of prison, kind of. That's always going to be the dance. And I know that a lot of people in crypto who are not building, they're just buying a coin and hoping it goes up, don't appreciate this. Because they're not doing the dance, and they would rather virtue signal, say, I'm going to buy the coin that advertises money laundering. It's like, okay, but you don't want the people building it to advertise it, because they will go to prison. But then you can just sell the coin and buy a different one. You don't suffer. But the people actually pushing this forward have some very real legal risks sometimes, and we have to make sure that we're doing things the right way to stay safe. Because no one should go to prison for this. We already have plenty enough. In fact, 4 of my previous podcast guests have already either were or are currently in prison for crypto-related things. So
no correlation, or at least causality, right?
Is that a knock on your door? Do I hear that?
Exactly.
Yes. Any other thoughts? I know it'd be keeping you very late, into the night.
I don't know. Is there anything else that we wanted to cover? I think we got to go over the stuff.
Yeah, basically. So I think my dilemma right now, our dilemma is how much should we ask for, right? It's a valid point that DCG is also struggling, and there might be other Dash-funded organizations that also deserve money. So I thought of putting out an amount that's 255, because sharing is caring. That doesn't take us all the way, and then subsequently everyone will know if I start panicking in November, December, because we need more funds. But I want to strike a good balance of the value that this could bring, at least to CrowdNode, but also to the overall overarching community interest. But I don't want CrowdNode to be like a greedy DFO that anyone thinks is doing this just for own profit. I think we made that pretty clear that that's not the line of business we're in currently. So I'm anyone who wants to share thoughts on the chat or on the pre-proposal channel, feel free to sort of help figure out a good silver lining in the amount we should ask for it to fly, but at least to get the process starting. And lawyers aren't cheap. Auditors that know their way around crypto aren't either. And we need this to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, my personal thought on that is a low amount that can be stretched out over a period of time, if possible. And I'm just thinking about like, you know, every single time I've seen some organization come out with something big that's not anything that's not DCG, that comes out with a large ask, does not go well. Just
Yeah.
doesn't. And so if it's, well, we need to pay this bill, but we'll have a reasonable amount, and then over time, after a
Yeah.
few months, it'll amount to what we need. That tends to be a lot better for like planning purposes and earlier in the cycle as possible. And so
Yeah.
we're at a point with Dash where I feel like we've bottomed for sure, and it's up from here. It's a strange time where, at the same time, we're almost out of rope as far as like the organizations have so little resources left. There's so little, everything. There's so little time. Like everything's crunching down here at the same time as we are rapidly solving big issues and we're primed for a massive growth spurt at the same time. And we're dealing, I feel like these, like, let's just say this year is the hardest year in Dash's history at the same time as the most hopeful year in Dash's history. It's both at the same time. I feel like if we just work very hard and get everything we need to get done by the end of the year, tomorrow, or rather next year, should be a lot easier. It should be less struggle to get the upward trajectory. I feel like we just have to it's like if you ever have a busy work day, like a work week or whatever, a deadline or, a tax reporting deadline or whatever awful thing happens. It's just like this week's going to suck. But as soon as we're past this week, everything gets better. So I feel like that with this year, we have a lot of hard work and some unpleasantness to deal with this year, some problems to solve. We don't know how we're going to solve this year. But after this year, so many things are going to be better come January, I think.
Let's hope that's exactly what happens.
Blue pill, red pill, down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I'm working for that. I'm working for that white pill. Everything's going to be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yo!
All right. Well, we ran out of audience questions and everything too, so I think we're probably good to wrap this up. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Andreas and Peter for jumping on and staying up so late for this. It's always a pleasure. We are now transitioning to the after party, which I think if you guys want to join, you obviously can, but I'm not going to even ask you to because of how late it is.
I'm going to go to bed.
Yeah.
I might just stay for a small rum or something, a beer.
Okay.
Just for half an hour, but yeah.
Yes. So if you don't know where the after party is, you're probably not that cool. No, just kidding. But no, you should ask me at the Desert Links in Discord, in Telegram, any Dash channel. Start commenting on this video on X as well. Just ask. And if you have a place for me to send you the super secret link, well, we will, and we'll get in. And there's always, if there's a word in crypto that's popular these days called alpha. Everyone's looking for alpha. It's like it's like new information, new secret information that you get before anyone else. There's always a lot of alpha in the after party. I didn't design it that way, but just people hanging around talking off the record. Eventually, cool stuff starts to come out. So go to the after party. Thanks everyone for watching. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button, and please throw some of your Dash into CrowdNode. Help these poor gentlemen.
Go trustless.
Yes, go trustless if you can. Make sure you back up your funds so you don't lose them, and we're all going to make it, as WAGME says. So have a fantastic weekend. If you're in Croatia for Hive Fest next week, I will be there talking. So come
Enjoy.
say hi, and see you guys in 2 weeks probably for the next live show of any kind. Bye bye, guys.